Welcome in, everyone. I'm so glad you're able to join me today. We are going to be talking about follow-up. My my suggestion to every single church, whether you're in New England or outside of New England, that you shouldn't forget the follow-up. Well, most of you probably know me. My name is Sandy Coelho, and I serve at the Baptist Churches of New England as the Leadership Development Director. And I hope that if you have questions, not only about this webinar that I'm doing today, but also about follow-up in general, or if you need some resources, I hope you'll take advantage by emailing me at my email that is shown on the screen. So again, I want to welcome you into our webinar on follow-up. And again, let's not forget the follow-up. I want to first say that, follow-up is one of the most essential things that your church can do. And according to George Barna, the study, it says that 11%, only 11% of churches have an intentional follow-up strategy in place. And so if you think about that, only 11% of churches have a strategy to follow up with people after events. So that means that 89% of churches don't really have a good, effective plan for follow-up. And so let me give you some more statistics because I think this also can speak to the fact that follow-up really truly is needed and there is a return for follow-up. So check out these statistics. First of all, 85% of first-time guests return if they receive a personal follow-up within 36 hours. Now, that's a great return. If we would do a little planning and strategy for follow-up, there could be up to 85% of our guests will want to return to our church because of that connection. Again, another statistic that reiterates this, that a guest is 80% more likely to return after a first visit if they receive some personal connection with the church. So I hope you see the importance of follow-up. How about this? Why do people return to church? Well, again, Barna has done some research, and he says that 7 out of 10 people say that feeling personally welcomed was one of the major reasons that they returned to church after visiting. So again, look at that, personally welcomed. That means somebody cared enough from the church to extend a welcoming hand to the people that were attending their event. Why don't people return to church? So this is the flip side. And the number one reason people don't return is that they feel invisible or unacknowledged. So here you have, two sides of the coin. The people that are going to return are going to be because they are feeling welcomed, that people are saying hello to them, that they are being seen. And then the people who don't are the churches where there isn't anybody that cares enough that they're there. So those are some pretty sad statistics and a sad reason why people aren't coming back to our churches. So I have to say that follow-up really is essential. And then there's another statistic from the Unstuck group that says that the people who take the next step within 30 days, so the next step could be joining a small group, volunteering in some way with your church, joining a class of some type, whether it's a parenting class or a small group. Again, it could be any type of class, a Sunday school class. Those people are going to be 5 times more likely to stay long term because what we've done is now we're making a stronger connection with them. And that's really so important in the area of follow-up. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that as we go along today. So let me say that I think that church follow-up is a threefold strategy. Church follow-up is a threefold strategy. So what are those three folds? Well, the first one is all about building relationships, building relationships. The second fold would be the encouraging engagement. So it's not just, saying hi, how you doing, tell me a little bit your family, but the second one is engaging them, getting them more connected. And then the third fold would be that welcoming newcomers. So these are three things that should be happening in your follow-up strategy, really to get that maximum return of 80 or 85% of people coming back, because again, you have an effective strategy for that. So let me tell you some strategies that I think are really very important when it comes to follow-up. And I think one of the most important strategies is responding quickly and responding personally. And we saw that played out in those statistics just a bit ago. So why does this matter? Well, it matters because the sooner that someone hears from your church, the more valued and remembered they're going to feel. And this also keeps the experience fresh, and that shows that we're being attentive to them, that we haven't forgotten them. So, how do you do that? You do that by making it personal, using their name, mentioning something they did when they were at church. So if they came and they visited your church for the worship time, you may mention, the worship, the music. You may mention the title of the pastor's sermon. You may mention, one of the points in the pastor's sermon, but something personal that they can connect with. So personal is important, as it's the strongest connection that you have with that person. So it's so important that it is personal, and that you make that strong connection and include, the connection's great, but we always need to call them to action. You always need to call them to action. You need to give them, well, what's the next step that can happen? So the most important thing here when you're responding quickly and personally is it does need to be consistent. It does need to be consistent, and it needs to be personalized. So a consistent tone and a structure across follow-up, what is it going to do? It's going to build trust with the people that have come to your event. So the first strategy, I hope you'll remember, is to respond quickly and personally. And so when I say quickly, I'm talking about within 24 to 36 hours is really the optimal time to connect with people that are visiting your church. So do your best to respond quickly and to make it personal. The next strategy that I would suggest when it comes to church follow-up is using multiple communication channels. Well, why does this matter? Well, it matters because people respond differently depending on their age, their preferences, and their personalities. So I want you to kind of think in your mind, where are you in your stage of life? How do you like people to contact you? Do you like emails? Would you prefer a phone call? Is a text the way to go for you? And my preference is not always other people's preference. So I have to keep that in mind myself, that it's not about me, but it's finding out the best ways to communicate with people. I personally love emails because I check my email several times a day, so I'm not going to miss an email. But I know people, my own daughter, I can use her as an example. She only checks her email every 3 or 4 days, if that, sometimes once a week. Well, she prefers her best, communication channel with my daughter is going to be a text. And so that's the way she wants to be communicated. Some people only want to be communicated through Facebook Messenger. And so, again, we have to be prepared to be able to, connect with people through different communication channels. And so let me just break them down for you. I'm not going to say something about every single one, but let me give you a list just so you see the magnitude of different types of communications. I've mentioned text, I've mentioned email, but there's also those personal message, whether it's instant messenger or a handwritten note. That's all always a personal message. Written messages are great. And I want to say and underscore the written messages because it's almost like an art. The art of writing has kind of gone to the wayside. But I have to say that when I write cards or notes to people, that's what people remember. When I do it for church, when I'm writing to people at church, I'm a Bible study teacher. So when people aren't there, I try to send a written note. And that's what people remember. They remember that I took the time to write in my own hand, that I miss them. And so never discount written messages. How about social media? That's a way to connect with people, another communication channel. And then, of course, there are invitations. What are ways that you invite people to come to events? That can be postcards. That can be a poster. That can be business cards that you hand out to people. It can be all sorts of different ways to handle people. And then, of course, another communication channel are ministry leaders, are real live people that we communicate with. So the idea here, which it plays itself out in, remember, the 24 to 36 hour range that you want to contact people for first time visitors. The idea is that it often takes 7 positive touches for someone to really feel connected. So I want you to think about that. It's not just going to be maybe that first text that's going to bring people back, but it's going to be multiple ways that you connect with people: a text, an email, and a personal message. And those can be done very quickly within days of a first person coming to your church. So, for example, on the Sunday that they come and visit your church, perhaps somebody in the church sends them a quick text. Hey, so glad you were here today. Hope you enjoyed the music. We loved having you and hope you enjoyed Pastor Phil's message about joy today. And we hope that you'll connect with us next Sunday, again, 10 a.m. Hope to see you then. And then follow up the next day with a personal email. Perhaps that would come from the pastor or from the office. But again, it's another way to connect with people, acknowledging that they had come to the service. And then maybe later on in the week, they get a handwritten note from someone in the church. And again, this doesn't all have to be done by you, but this is where you can get other people in your church involved in follow-up, because that's the key. So just think about it. In just a few days, there potentially could be 3 to 4 different ways, because maybe on Friday night or Saturday, somebody from the church calls, maybe a ministry leader from the church calls the person, and if they don't get them in person, just leave a message. Hey, this is Sandy Coelho from Church of the Vine. Just thought I'd give a call and remind you about our services tomorrow at 10 a.m. And then boom, your church has contacted them 4 different times. I wonder if they'll come. Well, if the statistics plays itself out, probably 85% of those people that you touch will come back to church. So it's so important to not discount the fact that we need to make sure that we're contacting people, rapidly, quickly, and we're doing it personally, but we're now using different communication channels. Next important strategy is always to offer a clear and an easy next step. Now, why is this important? Well, this is important because many people want to engage, but they just don't know how or they don't know what's expected. So let me say a little bit more about that. So how do you do that? How do you do that? Well, first of all, your church needs to decide, what are those next steps in the follow-up pipeline? So you can think about it is, what is the pipeline? What is the process? What are the next steps? Well, some churches, the next step might be a small group. It might be, encouraging to come to the next event that you have. Sometimes you'll encourage them to come to an event and help out. We're going to have a big picnic. Come on, help out. We have lots of things to do. Or, because again, a lot of people love to do something because they want to make an impact. You could also schedule a coffee or some type of a meeting with the whole group, with people that have been coming for a couple of weeks, and you do a coffee hour, or you have a meeting after church with a light lunch. So you can do like a meet and greet or something like that. But the thing is, you have to have clear and easy steps, and then you need to communicate so those folks know what are those clear and easy steps. So think about that. So think about, for the next time you think about follow-up, what are the next steps for people to engage when they come to our church? And so then you have to make those steps clear. And when you're communicating to them, that's when you indicate, well, this is what the next step is. And if you perhaps your next step is small group, then guess what? One of those communication touches should be your small group leader or somebody in the small group community that can reach out and say, hey, we meet for small groups on Wednesday night, and we'd love to have you a part of our small group. So then they'll know what are that clear and next easy step to do. And then there'll be opportunity if they're talking to somebody, say, hey, well, I have kids, are kids part of that? So again, people know what the expectations are, because a lot of times people hold back because they just don't know what the expectations are. And there's nobody to talk to. So if you open up the lines of communication with people, then again, they'll feel much more comfortable and perhaps wanting to engage, but offer a clear and easy next step. Another strategy is assigning follow-up to real people. Now, I've talked about this a little bit, but I want to underscore it here because a lot of follow-up happens perhaps digitally, or some written communication goes out, which are all well and good, and those should be, we should engage those, those strategies. Don't get me wrong, those are really good, but at some point, a real person needs to come into the mix. And this matters because people connect with people. They don't connect with systems. And it shows that your church just isn't about putting on events, but that we genuinely care about each person's journey. And when we begin to connect people with people, okay, that's where the relationships get built. That's where the opportunities to engage will happen. And that's where people will feel welcome. Goes back to what I talked about a bit ago about the threefold strategy of follow-up. Remembering that at some point a real person needs to get involved, and when we do that, it makes people feel like they're wanted, and they're not just a number, or they're not just a project, but they're people that we care about, and we truly want the best for them, and we want to connect them to something. So how do you do that? How do you do that? Well, assign your guests to specific team members or leaders for follow-up. In our church, we actually have people that come from several different towns surrounding our town. I live in Carver, and we have people that come from Wareham, and we have some people come from Plymouth. We have some people that also come from another neighboring town. And we have leaders in those particular towns or other church members in those particular towns. So what we try to do is connect people with other people that are geographically near them. And again, we do this for many purposes, but we really hope that the connection will be made more personal because they'll be able to connect because they live in the same town. So that might be a different way to connect people. And again, some of the people that we have in the different towns, they may not be leaders, but they may have the kids about the same age. So we do try to connect people that have similar affinities. If it's a senior adult, we might try to connect them with another senior adult. So we try to think of those things as well. So it's always good to try to connect people with another person. And again, you don't have to overload people. I've already said this before. You want to try to get as many people in your church involved in follow-up as you can, because that's the real win here. Because it shouldn't be about just one person in the church, but it needs to be about many. The more hands, the better, right? So think about that. You can use simple trackers. You can use, an Excel spreadsheet to make sure, people get connected. Because the worst thing is when people fall through the cracks, and you don't want that to happen. So you need to have some type of way to follow up. And of course, at some point, you definitely want to get your pastor and leaders to make connections, and they will, but that needs to be part of the follow-up process. And that's why engaging with your leaders to figure out what's that process going to be is going to be most helpful. And then you'll know how best to interact with that in the strategy. So as I said, get as many people in your church involved in follow-up as you can, because follow-up really should be woven into the fabric of your church culture, and it should be normal. Because trust me, the churches that are getting 85% return, they have figured out the way for follow-up to be in the fabric, in the culture of their people. And their people are welcoming, and people feel engaged when they come to church. And I have to remind myself that every time on a Sunday morning, when I come out of Sunday school, when I attend Sunday school on Sunday mornings, and when I come out of class, instead of gravitating to my group of friends at church, I try to have my eyes open and seeing, is there somebody that hasn't been here in a while that I need to say hello to? Do I see somebody who is a visitor that I haven't ever seen before? Well, I make a beeline toward those types of people. So it's so important, again, that we have a culture. And again, it's not just one person, that it rubs off on everybody so that people will begin to engage people right away if they're a newcomer. Or if, again, the other thing is that you may have people that have been disconnected for a while. So when they reconnect back, you want to make them feel welcome as well. So another strategy, if thinking about follow-up, is that follow-up models the gospel. So I want you to hang in here with me because, I think this really should connect for us. And why this matters is because follow-up reflects the heart of Jesus. Remember that Jesus pursued people. He checked in on them, and he invited them into a deeper relationship. And that's what follow-up is. Follow-up is us pursuing people. Follow-up is us checking in on people. And follow-up is us inviting them into a deeper relationship with Jesus. Because isn't that the heart of what we want to do as the body of Christ? We want to make sure that people feel welcomed. And follow-up models this by reaching out to the people that have come to our events. They're our guests. We're not waiting for them to return, but now it's us being proactive, going after them, pursuing them, finding out ways we can serve them. That's the heart of Christ. It shows that people matter. It shows that people matter. Think about this. The gospel, Jesus consistently saw, he valued, and he stopped for individuals, right? He stopped for individuals. Remember Zacchaeus, the woman at the well, the leper? I can go on and on. There's so many people in the gospels that Jesus stopped for them. He stopped and he took interest in them. And that's what we have to do. Our follow-up communicates that you're number one to us, that you're important to us, that you've been seen, that you're noticed, and you're remembered. And so it reflects Jesus' heart for the one. Jesus' heart for the one. Because remember, the sheep, the 99 were there, but there was one missing. And what did Jesus do? He went out and he pursued the one. When you're in church, maybe there's 100 people, you have one visitor, and when they leave, we need to make sure that we pursue them, because what do we want to do? We want them to be a part of the body of Christ. So, so, so very important. It also extends hospitality and belonging, because the gospel, what does it do? It invites us into the family. Sons and daughters, we're not just attendees, right? We're not just attendees, but we're part of the body of Christ. And that's what we want to make sure that we're communicating to people that come into our church. When we follow up, we extend the welcome beyond Sunday, because we want them to be part of our small groups. We want them to be coming to our next event, right? We want to invite people into connection and community, and not just into our church services. Because again, our faith is 24/7, right? And so we want to come alongside people and underscore that, Another thought in this area too is it mirrors God's faithful pursuit. When we follow up, especially with those who seem uninterested, we reflect God's patient and loving pursuit. And so, sometimes it takes a while for people, but if people know we care, okay, they're going to notice that at some point. There may be a point in time that they're going to need the church for something, and they're going to remember, wow, they pursued me. Hey, maybe if I go back there, they welcome me back in. And of course we would. Of course we would. And so we need to mirror that for people. It also becomes a discipleship opportunity, because the gospel, right, is about transformation, not about attendance, but it's about transformation. And so follow-up creates moments to pray with someone. It creates moments to invite them into deeper steps, like belonging to that small group or Bible study that you might have. It also creates opportunities for spiritual conversation, answering spiritual questions. Not that you might have all the answers, mind you, but you could point the person to the right answers, or you get the right answers so that you can, again, continue to engage with people. We demonstrate consistent care, during our follow-up. So it's not just follow-up, it's following Jesus' way. So I hope that you see that there are just these important strategies, when it comes to follow-up. So you're saying to yourself, okay, Sandy, so you've given me a whole bunch of these strategies, using different channels of communication, doing it quickly and personally, get all that, offering, that next clear step. important. Getting real people involved. Okay, I get all that, but so how does that look? So how does that look? So let me give you some steps. Let me give you some quick steps. So maybe you can frame this, because I'm hoping that you'll take this and share it with your leadership. Pray about it and think about, well, what are the next steps that need to happen in my church? So let me throw some things out. You may be at a different point in the process of follow-up, but maybe some of these things will resonate with you, I hope. First of all, you need to define the why. Define the why. So before you create a system, you need to clarify. So what am I doing this for? What exactly is the reason, is the why for this? And I hope you've already discovered. Well, the why is that we want to help people to feel seen and valued. Okay, that's a big why. We want to guide them toward connection and discipleship. That's another big why. And then we want to model a relational heart of the gospel. And that's a big why too. And so your church needs to define what that why is for follow-up, and perhaps write a quick mission statement so that when people say, well, why do we do follow-up? And you can say, well, we do it because we care about people. We want people to feel welcomed. You can go with the threefold thing I talked about. Maybe your vision statement is, we want to build relationships with people. We want to make people feel welcomed, and we want to help people get engaged in the body of Christ. That could be your big why. That could be your mission statement for follow-up. But the first thing you need to do is figure out what that why is for your church. Step number 2 is you need to make sure you have a follow-up leader or leaders. Maybe this is you're thinking about, wow, this is an enormous job. So maybe it takes a village, and it really truly does. But you always need to have a point person, a follow-up person, where you can funnel things through. So it's always good when you can designate one person to coordinate things. And again, you're not expected to do it all, but that person is the one that's going to make sure that it gets done. So it could be a staff member, it could be a volunteer, it could be somebody who has a heart for the people. And that's really what it takes. It has somebody who has really a heart for people, and you can use very simple tracking tools to do it. It doesn't have to be this big elaborate thing. You want to do as simple as you can when it comes to your follow-up. Truly, simpler the better. Okay, step number 3 is build that strategy. What is it going to be? I kind of alluded to some of it a little bit earlier. As soon as people come, you send them a text. The next day, follow up with an email. Sometime during the week, make sure that some type of handwritten note goes out to people. By the end of the week, making sure that somebody connects with them personally by phone, and then see what happens that next Sunday. And if they don't come, make sure you still follow up on them. Hey, sorry we didn't see you this Sunday. Perhaps something came up. We just wanted to let you know. We'd love to have you come back and visit. Maybe the second week is when you perhaps send somebody to their home with a coffee cup, a mug, a gift of some type. Again, not expecting to get invited in to have a cup of coffee, but just say, hey, glad you came to our church. Just wanted to bring a quick gift. This could be the week where your pastor begins follow up by calling people personally. Again, depending on the size of your church, but think about what is that going to look like. But so you need to come up with a strategy. What's that going to look like? And then step 4, prepare simple tools. What are the tools that would make follow-up easier for people. Maybe things like I just mentioned, coffee mugs. Maybe that's something that would be helpful for your church. Maybe having extra small group booklets that your small groups are in, you can give to people. Maybe it's magazines about parenting or raising teenagers, or women's magazines, men's magazines. Again, simple tools, simple things that you can use. Maybe you're going to ask somebody in your church to write those cards, those simple written cards during the week. Well, somebody's got to purchase those, and stamps. So, got to think about what are those simple tools we need, which now means we probably need a little bit of a budget. And you know what? Your church will be willing to give you a budget if you give them the why. If you go back to what I said in the beginning, define the why for people, and people, trust me, will be all in. Step number five, celebrate those wins. Celebrate those wins. Celebrate the things that are happening. Celebrate the wins of just, hey, we've got 3 people that are going to do follow up. Praise God. And figure out, well, what do we need next? What are those small steps we're going to start with? Maybe a month or 2 later, you finally get somebody who's going to write those cards. That's a win. Begin to, share statistics about who is coming back. And I think you'll probably start seeing that. We've done that in our church recently with our young people, and our pastor started a class, and we had one kid in the class, and then 2 weeks after he joined, the pastor's class was just he and the pastor. Then he invited 2 of his friends. Only one came, but now it was 2. And then those 2 kept talking to their friends. And then before you know it, it's 3 are there. This past week, we had 10 young people come to the pastor's class. And again, a lot of it had to do with the follow-up. The pastor was following up with the kids. The kids were following up. He was giving them tools of things to help them to connect with their friends. So, let's celebrate the wins and then make the adjustments as needed. Just make the adjustments as needed. So I hope that you've thought about follow-up, and perhaps you have questions. What are the things that need to happen in your ministry context? That's what's important, your ministry context, and finding out what are you already doing in follow-up. Maybe those are the types of questions, and maybe your church has something and it needs to be resurrected. Maybe it needs to be overhauled. But begin to ask questions. That's where it starts. That starts with saying to the pastor, what is our follow-up strategy? So let me encourage you and challenge you after you have listened to this webinar. I hope you'll go back and ask that question. What is our follow-up? And maybe, just maybe, God is leading you to be the one to make a difference, make an impact in your church. Because I'm telling you, follow-up is one of the most essential things that the church can do. I go back to that statistic from Barna. If 85% of the people would potentially come back to your church after an event if they are followed up within 24 to 36 hours. Statistics don't lie. And so I hope that you'll be challenged by some of the things that we've talked about today. And I hope that I've given you some practical tools that you can go back to your church and implement.